Welcome, everyone. Really nice to see all of these people coming together today to discuss about data linkage and survey research. So I'm Alex Chernat. I'll be the chair for this session. We also have four excellent speakers. We have Tom from University of Manchester, Charlotte from UCL, and then Nikos and Luciano from University of Southampton that will talk. The plan is to have each of them talk around 25 minutes. We'll do some short Q&A after each presentation for clarification, and then at the end, we'll have some more time for discussions. Just a little bit of background on this session. So a few of us, including Tom and Nikos, also Joe and Natalie, so Natalie Shlomo and Joe Saxo are part of a larger grant called Survey Futures, where we're looking at different aspects around survey research and trying to improve those. And we are particularly working on a work package on data linkage. So Tom will present kind of our attempt to create a practitioner guide, kind of a guidance about best practice, what's happening currently in this world of data linkage. And then we're very lucky to have two examples of people working with this kind of data in the real world. So the second and third presentation will just be some kind of application with people using linked data, and hopefully it will give you an idea what's involved, what are strengths, limitations, and so on. So it's an opportunity for you to learn about this. Like I said, the first will be an overview, and then we'll be more hands-on looking at some applications. So without further ado, we'll have first Tom to present kind of an overview of what we've done so far in this area. So Tom, do you want to share the screen and do the presentation?
Yep, sounds great. Thanks, Alex.
And just kind of be warned, we're recording this. This will be made available on the YouTube channel of RSS afterwards. So thank you for that.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Alex. So hi everyone, my name is Thomas O'Toole. I'm a postdoc at the University of Manchester, and I'm currently working on Research Strand 7 of the Survey Futures project, which is on data integration. So what is data integration? It's quite a broad definition, but we're referring to bringing together information from multiple data sources in a coherent and consistent manner. And this allows us to examine relationships between factors which are not visible from any one data source alone. And our project is explicitly concerned with why and how non-survey data sources can be used to supplement and enhance survey data. So to that end, we have three work strands. One is on the options available to researchers and practitioners working with integrated survey and non-survey data. One looks at evaluating and correcting for non-response bias, and another is on the applications for kind of monitoring and intervening in data collection. Today, I'll be talking through some selected points from our first guide, which is just undergoing some final revisions and should be available soon. I'll be presenting a review and overview of available options for data integration based on a series of evidence reviews, systematic reviews, and discussions with topic experts that we've been kind of carrying out over the past year or so. So data integration can have use cases across survey design and analysis. Data integration can improve representation through the design and update of sampling frames. It can enable more effective targeting of data collection and can enhance post-survey adjustments. And data integration can also enhance measurement and analysis through enabling measurement error testing across multiple data sources, improving estimation, and also adding a range of variables for substantive analysis. So I'll spend a few minutes now going through some motivating examples from each of these use cases. So how can data integration help to improve representation and survey design? The linkage of survey and non-survey data can create more comprehensive and detailed sampling frames. The idea is to kind of better enumerate and describe the target population. And so the postcode address file is often used as a sampling frame, and the census and annual population survey have been linked to better target minority group boost sampling. In social surveys, individuals who don't respond may be systematically different from those who do, based on a range of socio-demographic characteristics. And data integration can help to introduce more covariates to better target survey data collection through the use of responsive and adaptive design protocols. An example here is the Italian census, which has been enriched with a variety of administrative data. And studies have shown how this might facilitate a better adaptive design to minimize the number of interviews by better targeting underrepresented groups and making a more efficient survey. If these non-response biases persist, then we can use post-survey adjustments such as imputation and weighting. We can apply these to rebalance the sample. Some examples here come from the National Child Development Study and Hospital Episode Stats datasets, which have been linked. And this data has been used to address non-response through the imputation of missing data. Integrated employment biographies have also been linked to the National Educational Panel Study in Germany to improve the estimation of non-response weighting. So how can data integration help to improve measurement and analysis? So measurement error occurs when survey responses deviate from the kind of true population values. And so admin data can provide detailed longitudinal information which can be used to validate and correct survey responses. A recent example of this comes from the linked Family Resources Survey and HMRC payee data, which evaluated measurement error in earnings. So the integration of survey and non-survey data can also enhance estimation by increasing the effective sample size, including more cases and richer covariates than it's feasible to collect through survey data alone. And this can lead to more precise estimates, narrower confidence intervals, and a greater power to identify associations. So, for example, sociodemographic variables from the Millennium Cohort Study have been linked to educational data from the National Pupil Database, and this has been used to better address residual confounding in modelling, basically by including richer covariates. Data integration also offers access to a larger pool of contextual variables, which allows for the inclusion of exposures and outcome measures that might not be feasible to collect through the survey method alone. So, for example, the mortality register, air quality data, Twitter data, these are all commonly linked to survey data for a variety of content-related reasons, from assessing kind of health inequalities to measuring political attitudes. So a quick note on how records are often linked at the kind of microdata level here. So records can be linked exactly, especially if there is a good unique matching field, such as National Insurance Number, NINO. More commonly, records are linked on a series of identifiers when there is no high quality identifier available. For example, address, name, sex, date of birth, that kind of thing. Fuzzy matching here refers to an allowance for error in deterministic matching. So, for example, only using kind of the first three letters of a string or a name, or using kind of phonetic code. However, there might be processing errors in the data, misspellings, missing data, etc. And so the deterministic approach might result in a higher rate of false negatives or missed matches. When deterministic matching isn't feasible, we can employ probabilistic matching techniques. This uses modeling to estimate the probability of a correct match. It involves a calculation of linkage weights, which are used to link units across data sources, and these weights represent the match probability. They're typically ordered with higher weights indicating kind of correct matches and lower weights indicating non-matches. But this procedure can lead to a higher rate of false positives or linked non-matches. There are also some statistical procedures which are becoming more prevalent in the data integration process. So statistical matching refers to the integration of data sources with no common unit. So instead, we're linking similar units based on a set of shared factors. This was initially conceived by Rosenbaum and Rubin to mimic the features of a randomized control trial in observational studies by matching respondents, sometimes across data sets, to estimate the effect of an exposure of interest, so usually kind of policy, on outcomes of interest, usually kind of health or financial. Since then, statistical matching has evolved in official statistics to link, for example, expenditure and income variables from separate surveys. So when multiple data sources have been integrated, there's often some missing data, and this missing data can be reconstructed at the unit level using multiple imputation. A particular popular approach here is MICE, so multiple implementation via chain equations, which iteratively estimates missing data based on the relationship between indicators and assumes that this missing data is missing at random. There are also other techniques, such as predictive mean matching and hot deck methods, which can be used to impute missing data. A mass imputation here refers to the case where there are many more missing cases than available cases in the donor pool, and these techniques have been adjusted to account for this. It might also be worth mentioning here that this is at the microdata level, but we can also integrate data at the estimate level. So, for example, small area estimation, in which kind of direct estimates are combined with synthetic estimates from auxiliary data sources. So I wanted to just quickly share a new resource for data discovery. So this is the Wellcome Atlas of Longitudinal Datasets, which globally aggregates longitudinal population studies and can include filters for integrated and linked data. At the time of writing, there were 849 studies worldwide with some form of linked data and 131 in the UK. The Wellcome Atlas lists whether or not our study has linked health, education, geospatial, income, and social media data. So if you're interested in getting the kind of the lay of the land here as to which studies have linked data, this can point you in the right direction. It's recently launched and it's a little bit hard to Google, so I've included a QR code here which should take you straight to it. I'll kind of pause for a second if you want to scan it. So how can you access integrated data once you've found it? So this is written from the perspective of academia. Survey agencies will often have their own procedures and research environments. But given that linked data is often highly disclosive, to access these data sets in the UK, you need to complete accredited training. You can access these data sources through a few different trusted research environments or safe havens. And these also often have their own data catalogs or metadata browsers, so you can see what's available before you kind of start. These services can hold deposited data. So for example, there are a number of already linked survey to admin data sets deposited to the UK Data Service by, for example, the Centre for Longitudinal Studies and others. But others are also permitted to link data sources and will do so more on a case-by-case basis. So onto types of linked data. Admin data is broadly collected by public institutions for operational purposes, and it's usually tied to an observed event. So, for example, going to A&E, sitting GCSEs, taking out a student loan, that kind of thing. The nature of these interactions means that admin data is often linked to survey responses at the individual level. And typically, these records are deterministically matched using national insurance number and a range of socio-demographic characteristics. But for some fringe cases, there are cases where fuzzy matching and probabilistic matching have been used. Just to take the time here to point to ADI UK, which is a UK-wide resource which aims to get public sector data research ready. And it's a great resource if you're looking to use admin data for research purposes. Some examples of linked admin and survey data available through the trusted research environments I mentioned include health data, so NHS hospital episode stats, outpatient and admitted patient care, A&E, cancer registries, and there's also ONS mortality records too. There's also education data, which is mostly the National Pupil Database, so pupil records in Scotland and Wales, and individualised learner records. And there's also employment and income data, so records of benefit receipt, income, tax paid, that kind of thing. There are, though, a few caveats to keep in mind when working with linked admin and survey data. These are quite general, as each linkage often has its own sources of bias and error. But admin data can lack the conceptual specificity of social surveys. This data is not often collected for research purposes, and so it's not usually designed to capture attitudes and behaviours the same way a survey would be. Data quality can also be a concern with admin data. Missing data can occur because of incomplete recording, but also because of failures to interact with services. Consent to link bias is also big here, along with missed or incorrect linkages. They can all introduce further errors into the dataset. And while admin data does benefit from kind of frequent updates, it may also suffer when outdated information isn't deleted appropriately. And over time, that can lead to overcoverage. So, for example, the same people might be registered at 2 different addresses, or deaths might not be properly kind of recorded. So geospatial data is often collected through satellite imagery or by sensors. and can be processed to produce area-level stats across a range of resolutions, from government region to kilometre by kilometre grid, and also at the individual respondent unit. These geospatial variables can be integrated with survey data at the required or allowed scale, usually, to add contextual data for each respondent. And a great resource here is WorldPop, based at Southampton, who produce open access global gridded population estimates, which can be used for design purposes when sampling frames are out of date or absent. So there are a lot of different sources of data here which can be linked at the aggregate place-based level. So I've just included some examples here of permitted linkages through the UK longitudinal linkage collaboration. So these include measures of air quality, so PM2.5, things like that from DEFRA, access to a range of physical characteristics like green space, health services and public infrastructure, and also household level energy performance certificates, which include energy efficiency ratings and CO2 emissions. There are also some caveats here when working with linked geospatial and survey data, and again, these are kind of high level as each linkage can be quite different. But there can be temporal inconsistencies between the survey and geospatial data sets. Geographical data can consist of kind of annual averages, minimum values, maximum values, depending on the application, while survey data is often more of a snapshot of respondent attitudes and behaviors. Geospatial data is also often historical data, and the reliability of estimates can decrease the further back in time you go. And also the selected or permitted spatial scale might lead to a loss of information. So for example, kilometre grid cells are often smaller than the kind of selected enumeration areas that you're permitted to work at, which can result in information being lost through aggregation. And obviously that process increases as the spatial scale increases. And also admin boundaries can be relatively arbitrary, and they might bias, that kind of introduce different biases to your analysis. And so that should be considered too. And then we have digital trace data, which is perhaps the broadest and most difficult to classify. We've included here data which results from interactions with digital services or devices. Digital trace data can often collect real-time data, or at least data at much more frequent intervals than survey data can. And to be integrated with survey data, digital trace data must be identifiable. That applies to all types of non-survey data, but it can be a particular issue with digital trace data. And this means that there must be a shared unit of linkage with survey data that allows for these records to be combined. And this means that digital trace data is often collected or donated by a subsample of consenting survey respondents. Methods of collection here can include APIs and web scraping, smart tracker apps on your phone or laptop, document scanning, and data donation. And again, here it's just to point to the Smart Data Donation Service, which is a new initiative to bring together sources of digital trace data in the UK. This has just been set up, so something to kind of keep an eye on. So types of digital trace data often integrated with survey data can include so a lot of work here uses linked Twitter data, and fantastic resource is an entire wave of Understand Society Innovation Panel data, which is linked with Twitter data, and that's available through the UK Data Service. Studies have also collected expenditure and financial data through document scanning, and wearable health trackers can provide real-time accelerometry data, and also measures like blood pressure, heart rate variability, blood glucose. There's also real-time geolocation, and WARN sensors for external exposures such as individual level air quality sensors. And of course, there are, again, some caveats here to keep in mind with the digital trace data. Again, these are quite broad, but generally, access to things like the Twitter API is now kind of prohibitively expensive. And as mentioned, identifiability can also be an issue. So for example, scraped Twitter data on its own can lack a unit of interest to link on, and often needs to be, as I mentioned, collected from a subsample of survey respondents. Also, measurement error can be difficult to kind of understand and assess here. Recent work highlights that similar questions in survey and digital trace data might not be measuring the same thing, and so it's maybe best used as complementary rather than being, saying kind of one source is outright better than the other. There's some general limitations here. Of course, each of these types of data has inherent bias and limitations and error, and there's robust error frameworks for most of these linkages. But in short, I found it easy to think of potential limitations as extrinsic and intrinsic. So by intrinsic, we're essentially referring to data quality, so total survey error frameworks, and the issue of compounding existing errors and bias with consensus link bias and selection bias. And by extrinsic, we mean kind of fitness for use, as linked data sets are often not easy to find, access, or work with in these secure, restricted research environments. And a lot of linked data sets are also not deposited anywhere but destroyed after use. A lot of non-survey data is not designed for research purposes. For example, admin data can contain inconsistencies and ambiguous variables. And so working with linked data in general makes for a steeper learning curve than working with survey data alone. So where is the field going? I think it's likely in the future that we'll see admin data integrated with survey data to better optimize survey design, to cut down on kind of error-prone income questions, to reduce kind of respondent burden and improve data quality. Though obviously consent bias will need to be carefully considered here. On improving sampling frames, there's been a recent ONS proof of concept methods paper, which has applied gridded sampling methods to the UK. And so that might become more of an effective option to update sampling frames in the future, but more work's needed there. And admin and geospatial data and digital trace data, these can all help to address measurement error and can also help to introduce variables to calculate more effective non-response weighting and also to better target responsive and adaptive survey designs. And we'll cover these a little bit more in the next phases of our project. And that's everything. Thank you all so much for your time. I will pass back over to Alex.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tom. That was a really good overview. So we have time for some quick clarification questions if you have some, and if not, we'll kind of discuss more general conceptual questions towards the end. So Tom, a quick one about kind of matching. From the papers you've seen, do people just use one type of matching approach or do they use multiple and compare them? Any advice or any patterns you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it can vary on use case. Usually there's a national insurance number or something kind of more robust to link on. And if that's not available, then it's usually a kind of an iterative series of name, sex, date of birth, that kind of thing. And then for some fringe cases, for example, kind of with forename, surname reversals, that kind of thing, you might see more probabilistic methods used.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And Maria has a question. Yeah, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Right at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned linking path postcode address file to existing survey data to enhance the address frame, I think, to target underrepresented groups. And I think you said that there was an example of some research that had used census and APS data to do that. And I was just wondering, do you know what underrepresented groups were targeted in that way? Were they successful? And whether this was done at like an aggregate level or whether it was done at a record level?
It's a great question. So the reference that I'm referring to there is the Understanding Society Ethnic Minority Boost sample.
Okay, yeah.
I would have to refresh myself on the level that the linkage was done at. But I believe it was successful in adding underrepresented ethnic groups to Understanding Society. So yeah.
Okay, so it's maybe done at the sort of geographic level, sort of for targeting.
I think so.
Ethnic minority populations in certain areas or something like that. Yeah, because I was just wondering about the sort of ethics of using record level, because we'd like to target our sample. We use address space as our address frame on our survey, and we were just wondering about like the ethics of sort of linking sort of record level data and targeting based on characteristics or demographics. So we're actually just targeting at a high level now at an aggregate level, which is less useful and less successful.
Sure, yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah, at the record level, it can be quite tricky ethically to kind of but I think at the kind of aggregate level is from what I've seen much more commonly done because of the ethical kind of implications there. But I'm happy to email you the reference if it helps.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great, thanks so much for that. Okay, so I think we're ready for the next talk. Thank you so much, Tom. Next we have Charlotte from UCL. She'll talk a little bit about their experience with using linked data. So do you want to share the screen, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so that should be my slides on now.
Let's see if you can make it full screen. Yeah, it's full screen now.
Yeah? Okay,
The
great.
floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, so hi everyone. My name is Charlotte Booth. I'm a research fellow at the Centre for Longitudinal Studies at UCL. So I'll probably refer to that as CLS at some point. So yeah, that's what I mean if I say CLS. So today I'm going to talk to you about some work that we published last year as a working paper, and it's about sample representativeness and data quality in the linked next steps student loans company admin data. So this is work that I did with Claire Crawford and Morag Henderson, as well as other colleagues, but we worked mostly on this. So I'll just very briefly talk about the core studies that we have at CLS. So there's 4 core longitudinal studies that are run at CLS that have been going on for a number of years. The oldest is the 1958 National Child Development Study, which is a study of around 17,000 babies born in a single week in March 1958. The second study is the 1970 British cohort study, which is sort of similar in that it's a study of around 17,000 babies born in a single week in April 1970. Then the next study, which is sort of the focus of the talk today, is Next Steps. And this is a secondary school cohort, so that's how they were sampled. And the study actually started in 2004. When they were in year 9, but this is a cohort that was born in 1989, 1990, so they're around 35 years old now. And then the most recent one is the Millennium Cohort Study. So that's a UK-wide nationally representative study of babies born in the UK at the turn of the century. So all of these studies have different types of admin linkages, but yeah, today I'll just be talking about Next Steps. So this is just to sort of give you an overview of the Next Steps survey. So there's been 9 sweeps of data collection in total. It started in 2004, as I said, on a secondary school cohort when they were in year 9. And this was originally run by the Department for Education. And they did surveys every year. So when they were sort of age 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, they did annual surveys. And then after this, CLS took over the study and completed data collection at age 25 and most recently at age 32. So yeah, in general, the main respondent in the surveys has always been the study member, but we also have information from the parents collected in the first 4 sweeps. And in terms of admin data linkages, Next Steps is unique in the sense that from the very beginning, it's been linked to the National Pupil Database. So this is partly because it was run by the Department for Education, who holds this data. But this was a requirement of taking part in the study to consent for this. So that's a really nice feature of Next Steps, is that it has really good education linked data. So the National Pupil Database basically is education records for all English students, and it has things like their exam results across all key stages and school characteristics and lots of great information. And then at age 25, after CLS took it over, there was a request from the sample to do more data linkages, so to continue linking to education records, but also to health and crime and finance records as well. And then I've just sort of put the sample size on there as well, so you can have a look. So the original sample size was 15,770, although there was a boost, an ethnic minority boost at wave 4. So the sample size is actually over 16,000 of people who have ever been interviewed. And at the moment, we're interviewing, around still reaching around 7,000. So with all longitudinal studies, there is attrition over time, which is something that we have to think about. So a bit more on that in a moment. So as I said, at the age 25 survey, participants were asked for their consent to link their survey data to different administrative records and sources. So of the total sample of 7,770 7 or whatever it was, around 77% of those agreed to at least one form of these data linkages. And you can see, but they could consent to only one of them or whatever they preferred. So you can see the student loans company, which is what I'll talk about today, the consent rate was around 60%. And there's a bit of a trend for lower consent rates among potentially more sensitive data, so things like economic records. And also just to say that we did ask for consent to link all of these different records, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have the data ready and usable at the moment. So so there's definitely education records and hospital episodes and also the student loans, but as far as I'm aware, I don't think the other ones are as yet available. So a bit on the student loans company data linkage. So this is available via the UK data service under study number 8848. And it is under secure, like with all admin data linkages, it's under a secure license, which means that you can't just go and sort of download it on the day. You need to go through a little bit more of a process in terms of, as Tom mentioned, doing some training and also having a secure access agreement with your university and the UK data service to show that you have a kind of secure environment where the data can be analysed, that, you know, some things like it can't be connected to the internet, that kind of thing, because it is potentially more identifiable, even though it's not so much, but it's just potentially more secure and sensitive. So the data linkage for this was completed by the student loans company in June 2021. And CLS provided a number of personal identifiers to match on. So this was things like the pupil matching reference number, national insurance number, their name and address, and all things like that. And the matching was done on at least 3 personal identifiers, and no fuzzy matching took place, which would have allowed for small differences in things like names or misspellings or something like that. But that wasn't allowed. And yeah, I think I'll go to the next slide. So this is a bit of a framework for understanding the issue of representativeness in linked admin data by Silverwood and colleagues. So this basically says that linked cohort and admin data may not be representative of the target population for a number of different reasons, which include, firstly, selection into the survey. So that would have been, say, wave 1 of next steps. Then selective sample attrition over time, because as you saw, the sample size does decrease. Then there's selective consent to the data linkage, as not everyone wants to have their data linked. And then finally, we have differential linkage error. So this could be due to missed matches, so people just not being found in the admin data, or false matches where someone gets mismatched, basically. So the aims of our study were firstly to evaluate sample representativeness in the linked next steps student loans company admin data. So we did this, for example, by comparing sample characteristics of the linked data with the total sample and also external data estimates. And then we wanted to assess the quality of the data. So, for example, by comparing similar variables held in both the survey and admin data. And finally, to showcase some of the research possibilities of using this linked data resource. So we did this by investigating a policy relevant research question. So I'll just sort of briefly go through what we found. So firstly, this is the participant flow chart. So you can see in the darker yellow, we have 7,707 participants at age 25 survey. 58% of those consented to the student loans company data linkage. And then the people with actual records that were found, there was 2,219. So this is a linkage rate of 49%, which isn't particularly high. But then we have to bear in mind that people consented to the student loans company linkage a higher number than had actually been to university. So people maybe had checked that box or whatever, but not actually been eligible or be in the data at all. So we tried to condition on one of the variables we had in the survey, which was whether they had ever been to university. And then so that's the bit on the left here. So you can see that the consent rate was slightly higher, but the linkage rate was a lot higher. So you can see it was 80%. of those people who both went to university and consented to data linkage. And this 80% mark is what we would expect, because in 2008 or so, when this cohort were going to university, around 80% of students would have taken a student loan. So these green boxes just show the different data sets that were received from the student loans company. So the first is the application data set, which, and we have records for going from 2007 to 2020. And this is basically like the application the student made to the student loans company. It says things about like the course and university they're applying to, for example. The next data set is the payments data set. So this is sort of the amount of money and different products that were received by the student from the student loans company. So this is basically the amount of loan they receive in each year from 2007 to 2021. Then we have the repayments data set. So this is any repayments that were made from the student back to the student loans company. So this is after they graduate and have a job. And that was, we have records from 2009 to 2021. And then finally, this overseas data set is just basically, if you move overseas, you're required to let the student loans company know. So that's basically what that is. So a quick little view of the data. This is from the payments data set. So we had a quick analysis of in which year people received their first payment from the student loans company. And the majority of them received their first payment in 2008. So when they were 18, which makes sense when they're probably first going to university. And then another significant chunk in 2009. So potentially that could reflect gap year students or something. And then a little look at the repayments data set. We did a quick analysis looking at when students or graduates made their first repayment after they had received their last payment, which kind of would be a proxy for the finishing university. So we find most participants had made their first repayment within 2 years of receiving their last payment. However, 11% had made no repayments by 2021. So this probably reflects people who do not earn above the threshold, because you don't have to repay your student loan until you earn above a certain threshold, which is to protect low earners. So in terms of representativeness, we did a number of things. So we looked at participant characteristics and whether they were different according to if you consented or did not consent to the data linkage. So we did find some differences between the consenters and non-consenters. So the consenters were less likely to be female. They were more like, non-consenters were more likely to be female, and non-consenters were more likely to be from an ethnic minority background and eligible for free school meals. And then conversely, consenters were more likely to have a parent with a degree and also to have higher educational achievement and to have gone to university, but we already knew that. So there may be some bias we can see due to this differential consent rate. So we also compared our sample characteristics to external data. So HESA, this is the Higher Education Statistics Agency, and this basically publishes whole population statistics for higher education students. So we looked at 2008 and compared certain characteristics. They don't have too many, but the ones that we compared with our linked data sample. And again, we can see that in our linked data, we have a slight underrepresentation of females compared to the overall student population and also ethnic minorities. However, other things looked better in terms of sort of part-time student status and Russell Group University. So the Russell Group University is a group of sort of high achieving universities. And we see sort of the same balance between external population statistics and our linked data sample, which was good. So the next thing we did was think about data quality. So how we did this in various ways, but we basically compared variables that we had in the survey with variables maybe from the actual admin data. So one of the questions in the age 25 survey was whether they'd ever received a student loan. So we looked at this variable conditional upon those who consented to data linkage and had a student. And then we looked at whether they were found in the student loans to have a student loans record. So we found a good match, which is the bit in green, basically. So if you said you received a student loan, you were found to have a record. That was 76%. And if you said you didn't take a student loan, then 7% of those also were found not to have a record. So that's like a good match rate. However, we do see 15% who said that they took a student loan and consented to data linkage. However, there was no record found for them in the admin data. So we assume that this is probably missed matches. Potentially, this might be something to do with the non-fuzzy match technique, because you potentially, if you allow for fuzzy matching, then you can maybe have a higher match rate. And another thing we did was think about income. So in the repayments data set, we were able to create an estimate of their income because we know that you don't repay your student loan until you earn above a certain threshold. And then above that, you repay 9%. So for anyone who did make a repayment in the year of the survey, which was 2015, we basically estimated their income. And then we compared that with what they said that they earned in the survey at the time. But you have to bear in mind that the survey is just one snapshot in time, whereas the admin data is actually like the whole year. So that's why we might see some differences. However, there was a strong correlation between the two estimates, which was good. So that was 0.83, which was reassuring. But then you can see the distribution plotted here. So the student loans company estimate, you can see starts from a bit later because we don't have anything below the threshold of when you start to make a repayment. However, in the sort of higher earners, there's a much closer alignment, but it's people in the survey who maybe said that they earned quite significantly less, but then they would have been found in the student loans company data, and we assume that is probably because at the time of the survey they might have been earning less and then maybe got another job or ended up over the year earning more, so that's why there might be a discrepancy in that way. Okay, and then in terms of the last thing that we wanted to do was showcase some research possibilities with the data. So at the time, this was a while ago now, but at the time there had been some changes to the student loan repayment terms that the government made, and we wanted to see what those changes might mean for young graduates. So this sort of shows you a bit about what the changes to the repayment terms were. So students starting university from 2023 onwards, they now face a lower repayment threshold, which means that so they now have to repay 9% of their income above £25,000, whereas in the pre-reform threshold, it would have been £29,000. And they also added a longer repayment term. So these student loans get written off after 30. Well, they would have been written off after 30 years, but now they've extended that to 40 years. So that means that people will be paying their loans for a lot longer. So an analysis had been done by the Institute for Fiscal Studies by Ben Waltman, and they found that the changes were, they called them regressive because they're going to penalize low-income graduates the most. And also it would actually be beneficial to higher income graduates in the sense that they would repay their loans faster and therefore end up paying less interest off. So our question, we wanted to think about how could the survey data be interesting to add to this. So we have a lot of rich information about the characteristics of graduates. So our question was which types of graduates would be drawn into making repayments because of the change to this repayment threshold. So basically thinking about people who earn between 25,000 and 29,000, those are the people that will be drawn into making repayments. And then people earning above 29,000 or the pre-reform threshold, they're kind of the existing people. So we wanted to compare the characteristics between these two groups to think about what are the differences between them. So I do have to say that this is that our data is for 2015. So we inflated income to be in line with today's money or last year or whenever we did the analysis. So yeah, it was based on a number of assumptions in that sense. But what we found was that people who would be drawn into making repayments because of sort of the lower earners, which is the second column you see here, they're more likely to be first in family to attend university, be from an ethnic minority background, and also to have been eligible for free school meals. And they're less likely to have gone to a private school. And then in terms of their employment outcomes and what that looked like at age 25, they were less likely to live in London. They were less likely to have a full-time job, much more likely to be working in a part-time job, more likely to be in education while also working, and also much more likely to be on a 0 hours or non-permanent contract, also work in a routine or semi-routine occupation, and less likely to work in a higher managerial position. So in summary, those drawn into making repayments were more likely to be from less advantaged backgrounds and have more unstable working conditions, is what we concluded. And a couple of outputs from that analysis we did a sort of policy briefing that we published at UCL, and then also we wrote a conversation piece, like a blog post, which was published February last year. So yeah, thinking about what else this data could be useful for. So because it's admin data and you have these sort of annual collection in a way, it can be really useful to think about maybe building repayment trajectories. So we have information on graduates from age, say, 21 when they graduate to age 31. So you can look at maybe different repayment pathways. So for example, the people that make no repayments or consistent repayments, or who go in and out of making repayments, or maybe repay in full, and look at different characteristics in that way. Or you could use repayments as a sort of proxy for income, as we had done, but you do have to sort of make the assumption that no repayments means that they are low earners, earning below that threshold. You could also do different forecasting in terms of allowing for changes or different repayment terms, thinking about like what we did, who would be drawn into making those, how much more graduates would repay under different conditions, and how much quicker they would take to repay in full, for example. And augmenting this with survey data is really beneficial because we have lots of information about things like their mental health, physical health, family formation, and employment characteristics that you could supplement into your analyses. So conclusions: linked cohort and admin data provide novel research opportunities. However, it's important to consider issues of representativeness and data quality. The data quality in the Next Steps student loans company data were found to be good. There was a close alignment and matching between that data and the survey data. However, there was a slight underrepresentation of females and ethnic minority groups, probably due to the slightly lower consent rate in these groups. And we found some evidence of mismatches, so people who consented to the linkage and said they took a student loan but weren't found in the data. However, we think that the linked data sample size of around 2,200 is sufficient for conducting future research into higher education students and young graduates. That's the references, and that's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much.
I'll stop sharing.
Thanks. I really appreciated also all the stages of non-response and kind of the consent rates that you got. I think that's very useful, not always publicly available. So it's good to see. So we have a few quick questions. One is about, is it possible to get loans from other sources? And are there people that you might miss because of that? So I don't know, you only looked at one source of loans. I don't know what's the situation in the UK, if there are others.
Yeah, so I suppose you have to think about your population of interest. So if you're interested in students, university students in general, then like I said, it's not gonna be representative, because only about 80%. It's actually now higher. It's like closer to 100% now that people take out student loans, because the price of university has gone up since the time of Next Steps. But yeah, for Next Steps, it was around 80% of people. And yeah, this would be the only way to take loans. Yeah, I don't know if you could take it would be the best way as well. It wouldn't make sense to go and take a loan from a bank, for example, because the student loans company is a non-profit organization, and it's sort of designed to encourage people to go to university rather than to not go. And it's meant to support people who, support anyone who wants to go to university.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about your target population because you start with these people that are from the UK, right? If you're interested in all students, they might be international and they might get loans from other places, and then things get messier. So for your population, I think this is a good admin source.
Yeah, so Next Steps is representative of secondary school students in England. So that is the starting point that you have to think about.
Yeah, great. There's also kind of a technical question about student loans. Are they indexed? Is there interest? Is that something that you need to take account when you look at this data?
Yeah, so there is. I suppose in this sense, it depends what you're looking at and what your question is, I suppose. But yeah, so in terms of like policy relevant questions, it's interesting because every 10 years or so, the loan terms have changed, or they maybe changed how much interest is charged or how it's charged, for example. So yeah, there's a lot of nuances to the data. I wouldn't be able to list them off the top of my head, but yeah, it's an interesting area for sure.
Great. And then a final one, do you have any feedback about why people did not consent to the linkage?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like that work probably has been done to some extent, because there is always, whenever these surveys are run, there's always like a little bit of feedback that gets asked. But yeah, not off the top of my head. I suppose just looking at the patterns, we do tend to think that more sensitive data in general, even in survey data, there's a lot of missing data when it comes to income, because people don't like it's considered sensitive. People don't want to share that. And that's what we kind of saw again in that pattern with consenting to linkages. So it was this more economic records that people were maybe less likely to. But yeah, in terms of asking them for their direct feedback, I don't have that information to hand.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, might be worth having a look at the paper that you cited from Lisa, I imagine, where they looked at consent and who consented and so on. There might be some discussion there. So I think you cited at a certain point a paper from one of your colleagues looking at consent rates. So I think maybe have a look at that as a reference.
Okay,
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was excellent. So we have the final presentation now from Nikos and Luciano. So I don't know who wants to start. Nikos, do you want to start?
Yep, I can start. Let me share my screen. Hopefully my...
yeah, it's full screen. Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone for making it to the presentations. So this will be a double act between myself and my colleague Luciano Perfettivilla from the University of Southampton. We're going to focus exclusively on linking or integrating surveying geospatial data. So this is one of the types of data that Tom presented at the start of this webinar. And we're going to focus on applications and case studies. So let me just go through the brief outline. We're going to motivate, introduce a topic, and we're going to give a very brief introduction to what types of data are remote sensing data, how they look like, what are the potential data sources. And then we're going to talk about 3 case studies. 2 of the case studies are case studies that we are directly involved with, and one is more as an example to give other potential applications of this kind of data. And then towards the end, we're going to describe an open source software that we are preparing jointly with the World Bank at the moment to try and harness, scrape automatically geospatial data from various data sources, and we're going to end with a discussion. So first of all, let's introduce the motivation for using this source of data. By the way, using remote sensing data in survey estimation is not new. It's not a new topic. But the idea has become a lot more relevant these days because we have advanced quite a lot in how we access and use large data sources from alternative data sources, and how we combine this with survey data. So a lot more data sources are available and easy to access. That's the first point. The second point, which is not relevant to this presentation, but it has become more relevant because of the types of data and the size of data that is being used in applications, is obviously that there's quite a lot of advancement in the type of algorithms which we call statistical or machine learning algorithms. But we're going to focus on the first bullet point here. And we're going to look at remote sensing data and how they can be used in survey estimation. And this up to now mainly has been used for survey estimation purposes. So basically when we are interested in estimating a quantity of interest, like a total, a mean, potentially some other more complex statistic like a poverty rate. This is mainly the application, but there are some applications to also survey design problems, but are less common. So the second case study I'm going to refer to is a case study where potentially the application can be used in a survey design to resolve the survey design issue. And then the alternative data sources allow us now the opportunity to rethink how we can use them in survey estimation. So it's really important to revisit this topic of alternative data sources and see the potential applications that these have in survey estimation. Let's put some context into that and look at the relevance to the applications and also an example. So we already have official statistics type products that are using alternative data sources, and these are published, not officially perhaps, but they are available, they are accessible. And an example is basically the estimates, the global estimates that Meta is producing. One of these sets of estimates is on average wealth, but there is a variety of products that Meta, Facebook is producing at the moment. And I'm giving on this overhead, I'm having a footnote, is a link to the relevant website where you can visit and see how they produce these estimates. What is quite interesting about the estimates is that are produced at very low geographical grids level. So in the case of the average wealth estimates, they are produced at 2.4 square kilometer grids. And the second bit that is relevant to our application here is that they are doing it by using survey data combined with different data sources. One is geospatial data, which we're going to focus today in this presentation, but then there are other types of data like social network data, mobile phone data, topographic maps, and so on. The interesting thing about geospatial data is, first of all, that they have global coverage. They can be accessible, so you're not restricted to their access, and then they're frequently updated. So frequency is a quite important aspect when it comes to survey estimation, and I'm going to illustrate what this might be the case. So let's look at what are we doing here. So basically, the geospatial data will undergo several processes effectively, where it's at a step will attempt to obtain a layer of information. Normally, you start with a satellite input. And the thing that the analyst sees at the end, basically, is the top layer, which is the final raster. In this case, it's a raster of nightlight information for small grid. So each square is a particular grid in a particular country, for example. And that's what the analyst will see as the final output. So imagine that the raster will summarize for each of these squares. You will have a value, a numerical value, that will, in this case, illustrate, say to us about the intensity of the night lights in that particular part of the country that we're interested in. Now, clearly, the types of data that I'm talking about here, like night lights, are not going to be household. It's not about household information. We don't know exactly what the household information is, but potentially they can be used as proxies for household information. And what we're trying to do with survey estimation here is to exploit the relationship between the potential relationship between the geospatial information and the target outcome. Okay, so if we're able to identify a signal in that relationship, then we will try to utilize that signal in order to predict or estimate what we want to predict. In that respect, geospatial data will not be a substitute for good quality survey and census data, but they can offer an alternative to household data or other types of data if we don't have them, or for some reason we're not able to collect data sets. So Let me give a few more examples of other types of geospatial data. Here we have 3 examples: rainfall data, distance to water bodies, and elevation. And you can see how they are spatially varying in that particular country we're focusing on. So you can define them again as a raster of datasets. And this is a table that includes some popular geospatial data sources and the variables and the measures associated with them. So you have datasets on human buildup, terrain, climate, distances. You have potentially administrative data and mobile data in terms of coverage and mobile use. Okay, so obviously the type of integration that is relevant to this webinar here depends on the available geolocated information in the survey. So that's basically what we use in order to link the data from remote sensing into the survey data. We have 2 examples here. The first is relevant to the right-hand side map, which is an aggregated data set at the enumeration area, which is a commonly used geographical level in certain surveys. So here we don't have detailed information about the geolocations of the households, but all the households have been the geolocations of all the households have been aggregated to the centroid of the corresponding enumeration area. So that's the area, the lowest possible geographical level that we can use to link geospatial data into the survey. The left-hand side is a very favorable scenario, which is normally not available to secondary data analysts, but it may be available to data organizations that collect data, is where you have the exact geolocation of the household, in which case then you can identify the exact grid or irregular shape here of the household and link the remote sensing variables onto the household. Of course, you can define the buffer if you want to protect the identity of the household. So the blue circles there are buffer zones around the households. And you can see that the difference between the two is basically that the left-hand side, which includes the original raster, has a bit more variability, spatial variability, compared to the right-hand side, which basically is the aggregated at the enumeration area. Okay, so the first case study I'm going to present here is about poverty statistics, in this case for small areas. And the example that we're using here is not a UK-based example for now. It's a case in Mozambique. In many cases, we have examples from countries like Mozambique or other countries in Africa, because in these countries we don't have census data, or the frequency which census data occur is not every 10 years. Okay. And the type of statistic that we want to estimate here requires access to population-level microdata, for example, from census or administrative data that do not exist in many countries. Even if they're available, these are not updated every 10. Are only updated only every 10 years, which means that in the intercensual period, the information is not available, or it may be outdated. Okay. So the question that we had here is whether we can use geospatial data instead of census information to predict poverty estimates for small areas. So clearly here, geospatial data will be proxies for the household characteristics. We will not be able to observe the type of household or other characteristics that are very predictive of wealth or income, but we're just indirectly observing characteristics that are relating to the context of the household. That, of course, will result in reduced predictive power for models, but on the other hand, we get frequently updated information via the satellites. And the question here is to try and balance the risk from using outdated census data. So the question is, what would happen if we had used outdated census data as opposed to frequently updated geospatial data that have potentially reduced predictive power? So here is, we're not going into the methods, we're just presenting some results. So here we have three plots, and I want you to focus on the middle plot and the right-hand side plot. The middle plot is the estimates when we use the outdated census data. That means census data from 10 years ago. That's the 2007 census data in Mozambique. The right-hand side plot is the same estimates, but this time using remote sensing variables as covariates. So what we plot here are the direct estimates of headcount ratios. So basically that's the proportion of households below the poverty line versus model-based estimates, estimates that are produced using models and algorithms. And the first thing you can see is that using the outdated census results in some overestimation in some areas. You will see that the green dots are not aligned in the 45-degree line very well. And these points that line above the 45-degree line are mainly points that are associated with urban areas. In those urban areas, using the old census data results in overestimation of the poverty rates. And we think with Luciano that there is a good reason for that, is because effectively, in the last 10 years, there has been quite a lot of updated household characteristics in those urban areas, like in the capital region of Mozambique, which means that the household conditions have improved. Using outdated census data is not able to capture that kind of updated information. So the distribution of the census variables is different, and that results in the overestimation of poverty in these urban areas. And you can see that with the geospatial data, we are a lot closer to the 45-degree line. And so that's an illustration of where the frequently updated information can make sense to use compared to outdated information. Now, of course, this comes at a cost. The cost is that, as you will see on the right-hand side plot, this plots mean squared error estimates, so estimates of the precision of the direct estimates versus the precision of the model-based estimates. You will see that the model-based estimates with the geospatial information is still doing better than direct survey estimates. So in that respect, we gain a lot by using the models. But of course, the precision compared to using census data has been reduced, and that's understandable because we are not directly observing household characteristics with our covariates, but we're observing only proxies for household characteristics. So we pay a price in precision, but our precision is still better than using directly the survey estimates from the survey. So that's one case study. Now let's look at the second case study, which is not our case study. It comes from our colleagues in Southampton in World Pop. World Pop is producing products of grid population estimates. Okay, so they use what they call a top-down disaggregation method with machine learning to estimate population counts at very small grids. The grids are effectively 100 square meter grid cells, as is illustrated on the right-hand side of this plot. On the right-hand side plot on this slide. So they start with the left-hand side plot, which is basically population projections at some higher aggregate level. And basically they train an algorithm to find a relationship between the higher level population estimates and geospatial data. Once they train that model, because they have the geospatial data available at a very low level, they can produce the predictions of population counts at the very small grids. Again, this is an interesting application that has found its way in the UK. People have been experimenting with these methods as an alternative way of obtaining at least some preliminary population estimates. And in the countries where these estimates are used, this has applications to survey design because there are countries where there is complete lack or outdated population frames. So these are used as a proxy population frame in order to design surveys. So this is another example where the use of geospatial data could potentially be interesting also for survey design operations. At this point, I think I will hand on my floor to Luciano. Luciano, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikos. So we saw some encouraging results in the African countries for the poverty estimates, for the mean income estimates, and the poverty rates. We have seen as well other applications in other countries of the world, mostly in the global south, which begs the question, what happens in the countries that are not in the global south? And we have been working with the ONS to basically replicate the same work here in England and Wales to try to estimate the mean income for local authorities. Currently, the ONF, the UK, depends and relies in the census microdata, as a lot of other countries do. But obviously the motivation is, can we reduce this reliance due to the problems that we begun to see in other countries with outdated census? So the ONS is basically doing the linkage between the UK Family Resource Survey, taking the income variables, and then taking geospatial variables, for example, some of the Met Office, like rainfall, wind speed, etc. UK air variables as pollution, nighttime lights, distance to main roads, among others. Obviously, they do all the linkage within the ONS because of confidentiality. Some of the results that we have seen until now is that we have lower predictive power that we saw in the applications in developing countries. Because of that, we are trying to include as well administrative data, mostly tax benefits, proportion of ethnicities, proportion of ages, of age groups. And we have seen some improvement, but not what we would like. What we think, or at least we think it's happening now, is that we are predicting very well the urban areas, but the rural areas are not predicted as well as in developed countries, where you could expect that a household in rural areas would have lower income. In the UK is not necessarily the case. So we don't see that agreement between the variables, the geospatial variables and the income data. But obviously it is a very interesting case, and we hope we can get more information from that. Now, the other question that we had was how to obtain these variables. And I suffered during my first and second year of the PhD trying to obtain these geospatial variables, basically because you have to learn a little bit about or have technical knowledge about GIS, learn obviously Python, learn about Google Earth Engine, for example, and you have a lot of sources and data products to look for, to understand them, etc. And it's time consuming to assemble these data sets. Obviously, we have a lot of R packages, Python packages, which basically do this for us, but you need a lot of steps in between. And again, it's time consuming. So we have worked with the World Bank jointly to develop a package in R that is called GeoLink. What we want with this GeoLink package, which will be launched soon, hopefully, it will enable easy access to various of the geospatial variables with just a few lines of R code. We expect it to have high flexibility in the sense that you can get information from geolocation of the households, or as well from shape files or any other type of geospatial object that you have, which allows for different scenarios depending on the case you have at hand. So some of the data is, for example, the rainfall, nighttime lights, population, elevation, buildings, climate models, electrification access, cell tower, and mobile coverage, etc. So we wanted to show you a little bit of what it looks like. It's really simple, basically using the Nigeria's shapefile at admin2 and some publicly available household budget survey data with geo-reference for each of the households. The first chunk of code basically obtains the average of nighttime lights for the whole year of 2018 for a specific version of the nighttime lights. Some indicator that is called average mask. There are other indicators depending on each of the geospatial variables, but in this case, you just have to provide the shapefile, and it will obtain the whole map. You can see the upper map in the figure. If you have, for example, the survey data and you have the georeference, the geolocation of the households, then you can provide that, and then we could use, for example, a buffer zone of 500 meters, and you can estimate the nighttime lights around the household at that level. So in both cases, you are going to obtain the geospatial data that you want in the different scenarios that you need. As a further example, we applied these for small area estimation, for poverty, for a headcount ratio, using different scenarios. One, for example, similar to what we saw or what Meta does, that they create a grid and basically they extract information for that grid, and then we can predict poverty at that level. We can get as well information from the household if we have information geolocation of the household. If we don't have information of population, in this case for Nigeria, then we can use World Club and try to obtain the population in each of the areas that we need to. And finally, if we need only the administrative level geospatial information, we can obtain that as well. So in this case, for example, we estimated the headcount ratio for each of the admin 2, and you can see that the results are similar. They differ a little bit depending on the processing that we do with the geospatial data. But it becomes really easy to use the package and obtain all the information that we need in just a few lines of R code. So finally, to summarize, there are great opportunities offered by using this, in this case, the geospatial data, but in general, alternative data sources. They're already in use by private firms. We saw the example of Meta, and obviously they motivate the research in countries where we don't have enough data. As Nikos explained before, we can have countries where there's no census at all, or really outdated census, a few surveys, but we can use the geospatial data in those cases. Now, obviously, the question is, what happens if we bring that application to countries or settings where we have more data? So we can enrich survey data sets, we can have more information, and we can obviously rethink about the survey design, as Nico showed with World Club and survey operations, we can improve them. And finally, obviously, we learn that we cannot transfer, not necessarily we can transfer the application. It depends on the case. We saw how we suffered a little bit here in the UK when we just took the same variables and tried to apply the same case here in the UK. So it depends on the case. I don't know if Nikos wants to add something else.
No, that's the only interesting thing, just to think our presentation is that it's an interesting application where the use of these data sets is created by the fact that we lack data sets in specific countries where we don't have the data, and how this potentially might be helpful for countries where we have we have rich data sources, but potentially we want to rethink how alternative data sources that may be freely available can help us to enrich our current data and also potentially make survey operations a bit more efficient. So that's potentially something that as a community we have to think. That's all from us. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the topic. So it's nice to see this geographic data and kind of start thinking how we can use it. So there's a quick question from Trent asking if the package is UK specific, or do you come with your own, can you come with your own shapefile, or there's a database of these shapefiles you can use?
So the package is not UK specific. The package is global. So it effectively how the package is working is it goes around all the different data sources that are available, or we have available at the moment at least, because we will keep updating it. And it tries to pull geospatial data. So you can supply the shape file of any country you have. It doesn't come with preloaded shape files. I mean, there are examples, but the analyst will have to have a shape file, and then they can supply the shape file. The software will go and pull the data from the various data sources, and then the data will be assembled together for the shape file that is provided, and it will output a file that then can be linked into survey data effectively. That's the idea.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so that's really exciting. So I hope that answers your question, Trent. There's a question from Christian. Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. A great presentation, really interesting. And we talk about R packages or different software, and we also talk about application of geospatial data, geospatial data analysis in the UK context. So I'm wondering, from a researcher perspective and professional perspective, people who daily work with data and then trying to implement this novelty in their own studies, I'm wondering about the learning curve and expertise that will be required for someone who doesn't necessarily have a geographical or geospatial background. So how we bridge between that and social scientists and professionals who are trying to apply that kind of analysis on the social data, because we talk about analyzing different socioeconomic aspects. Thank you.
Very good question, Christian. So two answers, at least for myself, but Luciano, feel free to intervene at any point. So in terms of thinking how these variables may be relevant, I think there is a bit of learning curve in the sense that you have to become familiar with the data sources that are available and how these data sources may be helpful for the particular problem that you're looking into. In terms of what the package, for example, is trying to do is exactly what you say, Christian. It's basically try to reduce this learning curve. At the moment, if you are not a GIS expert or someone who has a lot of experience with Python or Google Earth Engine and so on, it's quite difficult to navigate yourself around these data sources. So the package that we try to put together is basically for people who are not GIS experts, basically. So who have a basic shape file, have some geographical identifiers in the survey, and then they supply that to the package to try and download the data sets in order to bring that into a format that everyone's familiar with. So basically you are you're avoiding all the difficult steps. That's the idea. It's not going to be, it's not going to be perfect, but it's something that will definitely create a basic or more than basic data set for people to explore. So I think the steep learning curve is there, but we're trying to minimize that. That's the short answer to the question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So other questions, more general questions for any of the speakers, thoughts? If not, maybe I'll, while you think about it, I'll ask Tom. So you read lots of papers in this area. So I was wondering, what are the typical applications of linked data that you saw? So what fields, what kind of data they look at, how they use it? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, sure. So we are in the middle of a systematic review right now. And the vast majority of papers that we're finding tends to be linking survey data to health outcomes, so data from kind of NHS England, and they tend to be using kind of substantive kind of content-related research, so usually to address kind of health inequalities. There's a smaller kind of pocket of research which looks at more methods-based work, and there's some interesting stuff going on there with non-response weighting and that kind of thing, but it tends to be kind of content-related. But there's definitely learning to be taken from either side of that equation, and the more interesting papers kind of do a little bit of both. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have a question in the chat about how to get consent. So I think this is quite a difficult one. I don't know if any of the speakers have ideas, how to encourage our respondents to give consent. I don't know, Charlotte, do you have any experience to share from the UCL side?
Yeah, so I guess there's the opt-in versus opt-out, and you don't necessarily have to do opt-in consent. So there's a new study at CLS called the Early Life Cohort Study, and we just did a feasibility study, and part of that was sort of testing different methods. And one of those was actually this was, I think this was for the genetic data collection. Or was it the admin data? Sorry, but yeah, so basically like sort of so opt-out consent, you do end up with higher consent rates. But after like asking participants about it and doing a bit of work on that, it wasn't necessarily because they sort of weren't aware or anything like that. It was more just like the cognitive load of having to decide and make a decision kind of prevents people sometimes, was the conclusion. Whereas like having it as opt-out sometimes might give a bit more reassurance as well that like everything's safe and protected and we're gonna do this properly and like you won't be identifiable, all that stuff. But if you actually have to actively do something, people are less likely to do it. So that's the idea. So potentially using a more opt-out style might increase consent rates.
Yeah, great. I would add to that, there's a lot of variation depending on the topic and the country. So there's different expectations of the type of consent you need. So in some, like for a survey, it's enough to say you agree to do the survey. For others, you might need a signature, and that signature needs to be provided later on for other people to see that, it's really explicit consent. And that varies by country as well. So in some countries, for biological data, there might be different expectations for that kind of consent. I don't know, Nikos and Luciano, for this kind of aggregate geographical data, do you need any kind of consent, or are there, things around consent you need to consider?
That's a good question, Alex. I don't know. I suspect that there is some consent process. I suspect that there is some consideration. As I said, we don't do the linking ourselves, but it's done all within the ONF. But it's an interesting topic because one is that we don't link to any other individual characteristics like admin data or other records. And then that's the first one. The second one is also the scale of the geographical scale at which we link might be relevant here, because if you look at something which is quite aggregate effectively, it might be okay. But if you start linking at very small grids effectively, and you link characteristics that relate directly to the household, then this is I suspect it can become problematic. Okay, so it is an interesting one. I have to look at the literature more carefully on ethics and consent around linking geospatial data.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So another, Charlotte, question for you. So it was interesting you asked for all of these different types of consent, and you said, well, we actually didn't manage to do linkage on all of this type of data. And I think other studies did the same thing. So I think other science society also got consent for lots of things, and then, I don't know, they did 1 or 2 linkages. So I don't know if you can share anything from kind of the work you're doing. What are the challenges to doing this kind of linkage? So even after you get consent, why don't we have more types of kind of linked data on different topics?
I actually don't have the answer to that.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot. Yeah.
I guess it just so these like government departments you might be working with, I know that sometimes it just takes a long time. I'm not exactly sure on the case by case basis why we don't have all of them yet. I'm assuming it's just taking a long time, or priority. I don't know exactly, but yeah, sorry, I can't answer that.
No,
better.
It's fine. It's just it's interesting because part of the literature review is comparing UK with other countries, and in other countries you see, some countries have more data linkage, and others have less. So it's kind of interesting to understand what's happening overall.
I think that we have a dedicated team at CLS who like speak to do the linkages. So I could definitely find out more information for you. It's just that I don't know it myself, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fine. And somebody has a question for you about fuzzy matching. So why did you decide not to use fuzzy matching in your study?
Yeah, so again, not my decision, but yeah, so I've also been doing some work on the education link data in MCS, and I know that they did do fuzzy matching there. And I think that so there was like an original linkage done in 2012 where they didn't, and then they did another one in 2018 where they did allow fuzzy matching, and they seem to get a higher, like they got more participants doing it that way. So I imagine, so it looks like it might be a good thing to use this fuzzy matching because you do end up getting more participants. But I think that the worry is that that you might falsely match people. So they have like they're quite strict with how they do it. And they kind of do it on a case by case basis as well. So if there is a match, then they will like sort of manually double check it as well. Yeah, so it does look like fuzzy matching is an option, and it potentially is a better one. But yeah, again, not an expert in that area either.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So, Nikos and Luciano, question for you. So you mentioned that, this method that you're using, it really depends on kind of assumptions we have between correlations between the geographical data and kind of the predictions you're doing. I was wondering if you have an idea what are kind of topics or areas where you think this is useful, and topics or areas where, there's kind of limitations. Could you do this for attitudinal questions, for I don't know, public services or just for some topics? I don't know if you have any ideas on that.
We have not explored it beyond income and deprivation related questions. At the moment, there is a project that is happening where people look at public services in specific countries. So it remains to be seen how this is going to work there. But I think there are going to be limitations how far we can stretch this kind of applications. I'm not sure that attitudinal questions, for example, will be an appropriate one. I will be very surprised. The link I gave to the Metasys webpage has a number of applications where they use this kind of data for specific applications. So it will be interesting for colleagues here to visit it and see what kind of estimates they produce. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And another question, I don't know if Charlotte, maybe you'd be a good person to answer this. So when you do the consent questions, do you do it just at one point in time? Do you do it at multiple times? Do you think you need to get consent again after some time passes? Do you have any idea on how to go about that in a longitudinal study?
Yeah, they do ask at every wave, I believe. So yeah, for example, in the Millennium Cohort study, we have education linked, that it was asked from parents at age 7. But then once the participants became sort of eligible to give their own consent after 16, it was asked to them. So if a participant did not consent, for example, from like say 17 onwards, then they don't appear going forward, whereas they still have that consent for when they were younger, sort of thing. So yeah, it's kind of an ongoing process that's done in the survey.
Great. Thank you so much. So final question for everyone. This is kind of just my own interest. I'm curious what you think is the role of surveys. So we have these lots of different types of data and kind of we're trying to figure out how to use them together. And I was wondering just your predictions for the future. What would be the role of survey in this, I don't know, world full of data of different sources? So, and I know you don't have necessarily an answer, but I'm curious what you think. So I'll start with you, Tom. What do you think? How will we use surveys in this world of multiple sources of data?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's all best used in complement with each other. So there's not really a good replacement for survey questions that are designed to capture specific attitudes and behaviors. So I don't think surveys will ever really go away. But I think there's definitely scope to enhance survey data with non-survey data. And I think the more we go into the future, we might see different sources of data being integrated in different ways. I mean, for example, the census is currently kind of in talks to change format, and there's opportunities, I think, in the future. But I don't think surveys will ever really go away because there's not really a good replacement for them.
Great, thank you. Charlotte, what do you think at, I don't know, CLS? Will you continue doing surveys or will you replace them with other sources?
Yeah, I hope so. So I have a psychology background, so a lot of things that I would be interested in wouldn't be available in admin data. But admin data is really impressive in the fact that it's sort of collected passively. It's like we have these annual estimates, and also things are quite hard to report, things like your income and education. People forget their grades, for example. So yeah, I think the two together are the most powerful. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Nikos, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I believe that surveys will exist in one way, one form or the other. There's a lot of evidence, even theory-based evidence in statistics that says that, just not having properly randomized control, good design data is problematic. It's not about the size of the data, it's about how you design the data collection. So I think that surveys will exist. Even if, those people that talk about big data, they train their algorithms on ground truth data. They train their algorithms using survey data. So they need survey data. Everything is supervised in our world, not unsupervised. It's interesting. Charlotte mentioned the income example. I think there is a lot of one theme of data that we didn't talk a lot about. Is basically what happens with kind of transaction data that happen via scanner data or bank transaction data. That they may be very powerful in terms of conveying economic information. It's interesting to see what's going to happen with consumption surveys, where you ask people to report the patterns of consumption, which might be quite difficult. So can we get alternative data sources to replace, to reduce the data collection and consumption surveys and so on? So there's a lot of potential both for the enriching data sources, but also for perhaps changing the survey operations, reducing costs potentially, and getting better quality data. So.
Great, thank you. And Luciano, what are your thoughts?
I think the same. I think we need surveys, at least researchers. Now the question is, the people that fill in those surveys don't seem to need it. So basically, we get the two problems of the respondent rate. But I think in the future, we still need surveys, at least to understand the world around. We can use all these alternative data to try to enrich it, to try to improve the methods, how we capture it. But we are still dependent of surveys, and I don't see a future without surveys. However, we are seeing a future without respondents, which is the main problem.
Yeah, it's harder and harder to get a respondent, so that's a really good point. There's a point from Daniel. I guess this is hard to answer, but probably something for all of us to think about, because I guess a lot of us work with surveys, is how to kind of highlight this idea that surveys are still important, even if, I don't know, other things might look exciting. They're still kind of building blocks that might be hard to replace. And that might be something work for us to do to sell or, I don't know, present, the importance of surveys. So I'll probably stop there. I think, Daniel, it's a little hard to answer that question in 2 minutes to convince governments that they should continue funding surveys, but that's probably something continuous work we need to do. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Also, special thanks to Tom, Charlotte, Nikos, and Luciano. Really great presentations. And like I mentioned, the plan is to put this recording online, so they should appear at a certain point on YouTube on the RSS webpage. And I should also mention that this is part of a larger grant funded by the SRC's Survey Futures, and all the work packages will present some kind of workshops or some kind of results they have. So look out for other training and workshops that we're going to organize in the future. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and see you soon, face-to-face, hopefully at a nice survey conference.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.